Okay, so to get to the point, um, there are two. I think there are two angles of attack. One
Uh-huh.
angle of attack is the is actually saying how do we teach a particular set of techniques? Just what are they? I mean, how do we actually teach it? Um, Particularly if someone's holding a text,
Hmm.
and this is okay. 9,000 problems with that. Some solutions. Um, the
Hmm.
the other okay, and then the other thing is actually looking at what you actually have here in terms of system, so that we say, given what it is. I mean, if you're going to teach one thing, you teach it one way. You're going to teach something else, you teach it a different way, right? So therefore, we should take a look at the system itself. I do not actually favor your approach of saying the system is done, never mind that part, don't have to teach that part, does not relevant, I'm teaching about something else. I actually don't think that's true. So,
I, I appreciate
yeah,
and respect that. Despite the fact that my question is in the second area, I'm absolutely open to everything you have to
right.
say. But the caveat here is that Core Micro no longer represents the current state of core development. Those screen grabs that I gave you are a
Right.
better example.
Okay. Um, I'm with you on that. In other words, I'm not going to nitpick, right? I mean, definitely that's not where I'm at. I'm not going to nitpick. I'm talking about something pretty damn basic. So just as a preview, that maybe that's not a waste of time. So,
I'm down.
but let's go to the first part. Now, what I've found, I have also had theater training, and then it's the teaching thing, right? That I've done for a living is a big deal with this. So,
Absolutely.
and particularly science, because you don't want people to. I was one of these terrible teachers, as far as my colleagues were concerned, who said that going up there and being performative and covering the material is not teaching. Okay. So my take was I wanted people to walk out of there with value added of some kind. Um, so this, of
I
course,
would
was
say it depends on on the performance.
there's more to it than performance. There's a lot of professors who go up there and put on chicken outfits and are hilarious and all the rest of it and fascinating in some way,
Okay.
but it's not the
Hmm.
same thing.
I hear
So,
you.
so anyway, that's all preliminary. There's several ways to teach something that the person is hope you're hoping that they are going to be better at. But part of it is that most of the time, particularly in theater, particularly in science, particularly in martial arts, they walk in with a head full of mush, right? Or at the very least, a bunch of things that are interfering with any value they may actually get out of this. Even if what they
Yeah.
have in there isn't terrible, it may not be what is actually being addressed. So therefore, you're they're not coming in as blank slates, right? So
Right.
that
And to
right,
use the loosest possible language, what we're really saying is they're coming in here with a traditional RPG model in there.
they may or may not. I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to
Yeah.
say they may well, but let's hold off on just what that's about in a minute.
Hmm.
You have to. It's the kind of thing that one must be alert to. In fact, you know what? You're right. Let's stick with that. That's not an irrelevant point right now, at all. Um, just to take teaching evolutionary biology as a really, really good example. Um, the a person coming in may well be utterly opaque to whatever it is you're going to do in the class. Utterly opaque. They're just not going to get it. And it's not going to be for them. And they're not here to do that. They don't come in with any willingness. They don't come in with any
Right.
curiosity. They're just not going to do it. And you may try to spark some kind of curiosity or in the first interaction see if they're at least, kind of open to something, but if they're not, then they're not. This, surprisingly enough, is not actually the evangelical Christian students for the most part. A few of them, but not many.
Okay.
It's actually the people who have been baked in a particular set of mantras about biology that they got A's for in high school. those are actually the worst. So just like that in role playing, the reason I think this is relevant is that if you get somebody who is really into the traditional thing, and let's just personally say right now, and has a great time at it,
Mhm.
insofar as they recognize or are interested in anything you say in the first two paragraphs, they're on board. They're curious. The concept of functional play is available to them. They've been doing it in a particular way.
I
And as
hope,
long as
and
they
this is
see something, they'll
probably
say, oh, and they're interested. The problem are people who are not going to, they're going to think they get it, and they don't. They're not going to step out, defog, and say, oh, look, I'm reading a book that I haven't read before. And they just aren't going to do that. And there's
okay. So
nothing you can do about
in
that.
your allegory, it's kind of like the hardest people to teach are not the people from the opposing school. They're from the people of a school that kind of adjacent
Yeah,
to yours.
but that school, this is the important thing. And the analogy is very clear. The school that they're coming from isn't a school, it's a subculture.
That's
It's a
okay, a
sub,
body of thought, whatever. Yeah,
yeah. But it's not a working one. It's just a bunch of gabble and subcultural identity.
right,
So
right.
there's
Just to
nothing there.
push the metaphor a little bit further, I mean, because folk science is folk science.
Right.
People walk around having actually much more faith in science um, than real scientists do.
Yeah, for example,
Right?
yes, yes, and also the phraseology that if somebody comes to me saying, oh, I'm into evolutionary biology, are you Gould or are you Darwin? And are you Gould or are you Dawkins? And I'm kind of like, so that's a good example, right? So it's the same thing with
Yeah,
role playing. Person comes in, and sorry to say,
and you
frankly,
know, at that point, fuck you. I'm
right.
Sheldrake.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's exactly. But the point being here is that they're off the beam in terms of the discussion in the first place. Okay, let's get back to this because I think we're actually on the right
Right.
track here, which is that we are talking a little bit about the audience here, but not. I don't want to wallow in it. I want to instead say we're going to just take it as a given right now without trying to parse all the different pieces, all the, and like dissect it. We're just going to take it as a given that somebody looking at this is going to be in some degree of receptivity, some degree of curiosity,
Mhm.
right? Period. So let's just stick with that and not worry about, like you said, don't market to psychopaths. Well, in this case, don't market to basically heads full of concrete, right? I mean, so you can batter on that with your hammer, page after page after page, and it's basically not going to work. So in this case, um, what are the activities in theater, martial arts, etc., science? Doing is part of the learning, and some people go so far as to say that doing is really the truly functional learning, and
Mm-hmm.
that points of reflection, pinpoints of reflection along the way, are a big deal. The concept that comes all the way back from 100 years ago from the commies, which is brilliant, is called scaffolding. And scaffolding is where, in the first stages of learning, the person is doing, but there's a certain amount of support provided by somebody else in terms of, okay, next. And here, let me, I'll wiggle that. Wait, hold on, let me wiggle that one for you. But you still are letting them do it. You're definitely not doing it for them and just having them trail after you. I mean, I'm sure somebody's tried to teach you at some point by going, you see, click, click, click. You see, click, click, click. Oh, then okay, there, you're done. Now you do it. And you're kind of like, what the fuck was that? Right?
Right.
So the scaffolding is the opposite. Scaffolding says, all right, look, I know there's a bunch of this weird shit in front of you. Pick up the green one. Okay, pick up the green one. And maybe there's like a little outline there, but you don't just like let the person suffer. You're there and you're kind of like, but the important part about scaffolding is just that you're there and not fucking running their life or taking over. But the
Yeah.
important thing about scaffolding, which is really huge, this guy's name's Vygotsky, and I think you'd actually like him. Um, Vygotsky said the big deal of this is to learn how to, first of all, shut the fuck up when you need to, and second, get out of there. Don't have the scaffold be the normalized part of this. You've got to
Okay.
learn to get out of there every, as part of this.
Right. Right.
Um, and uh, and I think
I
this
do
is
like that.
actually, yeah, this is good stuff. I mean, it's actually, and of course, it's ignored by the majority of American curricula. But how do you do it? How do you, there you go. Um, so
No, and you know what?
mhm.
This even applies to child rearing if you
Oh,
think about it.
believe me, I think it totally does. Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. Um, Not that, how am I going to put it? With speaking as three kids at 13, 14, and 14, in theory, I agree. We'll see how I do.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
definitely tough, but
yeah,
the long run is that you want your kids to be
sure.
anti-fragile, right?
Exactly. Right. So, in that case, if you keep treating them as fragile, then they'll remain so, first of all. And it's the same thing with
And they
this
think
business
that
about,
scaffold is always going to be there. They've developed
right.
a routine that expects the scaffold.
hmm And
I hear you.
so, yeah, so in this case, for the role playing, now we have a difficult question that theater people and science people have always struggled with. And I don't think that there is any consensus or any, even better, any actually well stated conclusion, never mind consensus. I've never found an actually well stated conclusion about it. And what they struggle with is when you're doing, how much of it is, for lack of a better word, uh, uh, just inconsequential, right? I mean, it's for one thing, it might be just little teeny pieces of what you'll eventually do, and so none of it is actually doing it. It's just doing little pieces of it. What you might think of as drills, exercises, stuff like that. Um,
Okay.
and then another one is uh, uh, okay, so how much of it is drills and exercises? How much of it is actually getting in there and doing the thing with maybe a somewhat safer or more, it's not like you're getting paid to, win or lose the martial arts fight. You're not getting paid to, you're not going to publish a paper off of what you're doing, but at least you're actually doing it and will get a yes or no from doing it, right? So that's the next step. It's not just a drill. It is actually doing it. It's just kind of you know, a less fraught pressurized version of it. Um, and so then,
Can I interrupt you for a
yeah,
second?
sure, sure. Yeah,
Because you just sparked an idea. We think
okay.
about the initial adventure that you're supposed to put in your rule book, and it's designed to be a really simple, one thing at a time, simpler to more complex. Here's how the stats work. Here's how skills work. Uh-oh, you're in combat. You're attacked by a really simple, easy to kill creature. We're teaching you how things work. Step. Okay, great. But you know what? You never see a similar thing for the GM.
You don't. You really don't. And I even think that historically, that those scenarios are actually missing the mark on what they would be teaching because it's actually not that important, in my opinion,
Mhm.
for the people in question to learn the routines of the initiative order and the rolls to hit and the way you roll for perception and stuff like that. In my experience in role playing, that stuff is actually picked up quite easily as long as you're not bullshitting anybody, right? As long as you're not scaffolding too much and doing it for them. Now you do this, now you do this, and you're actually making their choices for them.
This is where
As long
elegant
as you, right,
system design and low crunch comes in
partly
as real factors.
they are
But
all,
I would say that
but
definitely more important than those
mhm,
is learning where this game or this GM
mhm.
draws that line,
Yep,
Harper's line.
absolutely. And so I really think, but we also need to think about what really needs to be taught. And with respect, I don't think I wasted your time with all of that talk about the listening and stuff like that. Because if there's one fucking thing that people bring, now we're talking about that wooden headed thing that they're going to be bringing. If there's one thing that they bring, it is that whatever happens in play, I, the GM, will vet how it goes in and I will vet how it comes out. Even if I'm being very gentle and fun and doing it for everybody's good time, right? Then I will still just make sure that the experience, I know the first scene, I know the last scene, and if I don't know the last scene, I'll make it up in time before we get there, but I'll know it at some point. I'm going to know that last scene. And I know the first scene, I know the last thing. Everything in between is me tap dancing and entertaining them so that we get the right arc and the right everything. And then, bam, hey, here we are at the climax, shockingly right at the 3/4 mark in our convention session, right? Okay, none of that is play. I don't care if you can go to any gaming convention and see 50,000 examples of it at the table. It's not play. It's not.
Yeah, that's more like a tournament demo right there.
Even more so, it is literally transitive entertainment. The entertainer is entertaining you. One person was writing about it at a play recently. He says it's a lot like an escape room. Escape room enthusiasts are going to have a fine time, or people in that kind of zone. They want to interact, but they also want the experience to be, complete. They want to be in the hands of the novelist, the hands of the film director, the hands of the deliverer of the fun, right? So
yeah, and there are many.
right.
Actually, there are many schools of entertainment that you could slot in here. The stage hypnotist is
Right,
one.
absolutely. And again, I am a consumer of transitive entertainment. I have books on my shelves. I watch shows. I'm not saying it's evil. I am saying it's a different medium from what we
Right.
are talking about. Period. No shame, but let's not do that here because that's not what we're talking about. Does that seem fair?
Okay. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
But let
we
me
gotta stick with that.
let me answer that by telling you the degree to which I lean on it. Sometimes if there's a very mission oriented adventure, usually this comes off the shelf, right? Or I'm directly taking a story from a television episode or something. So there is a mission. It's pretty singular. Go do it.
Right.
Those are where I'm more likely to fall into this performative habit because it's not so much the story about the characters. Tonight, I'm taking it easy on myself and I'm letting it be the story of the mission. I'm sort of pushing them through it.
Okay.
And that's the performative thing. That's like a fallback for me when I'm like feeling lazy.
Let's hold on. Go ahead.
It's also a fallback that's always there, kind of like a safety net for if I'm doing a more intense, character-driven, and dynamic thing, the thing I really want to do, where I'm not just in the zone by myself and you're watching effectively.
No, you're right.
But we're both in a zone where we're both in the zone together, right? That's the actual goal. But when that fails for whatever reason, I can always fall back to this safety net and pull off the tap dance, and you'll still go, wow, that hit the mark right at the mark. So it's like it's a safe default, right?
I'm not going to agree or disagree at this point. You've described your circumstances of play very accurately, and that's important for you to have done. Okay, so
yeah, and to quote Hunter Thompson now, I'm not sure that would work for everyone, but it worked for me.